Okay, thanks Kumi for taking time to speak to us today. So I'd like to just start off by asking you your expectations for the COP.
Well, as Greenpeace, we have been saying that critically important is we have to get agreement on a long-term goal. And when we say long-term goal, we are saying that we need to have a target of 100% renewable energy access for all by 2050. We are concerned when governments start talking about 2100 as a point of decarbonization because that's leaving it far, far too late. We are committed to the idea of ensuring that the Green Climate Fund on finance, that developing countries are actually supported so that they don't need to follow the same dirty energy pathway that developed countries built their economies on, but also to help them with adaptation and also to help with loss and damage that poor, vulnerable countries who have not contributed substantially to carbon accumulation are already paying on a regular basis. We also expect that whatever comes out should be binding, that governments must be held accountable for the implementation of the commitments that they make here, and that they need to be transparent in how they go about meeting whatever commitments they make. Importantly, given that the intended national commitments that have been put on the table by different countries around the world, when you add it up, it still has us heading in the direction of a 2.5 to 3.5 degree world, depending how you add it up, tells you that in fact we don't have the level of commitment that we need to secure our children and their children's future. So what we are saying is that we support the vulnerable countries who are here, who are saying that we need to get warming to peak at 1.5 degrees rather than 2 degrees. The people of small island states are now chanting the slogan of 1.5 to stay alive. And given that we have such a big gap between what commitments are on the table and what we really need, we are calling very strongly for a 5-year review mechanism, not simply to just look at how we are doing, but that should be a point where ambition levels are picked up. We cannot lock in at this COP the level of commitments that are there, because then we are locking in commitments that are taking us to a world that is potentially in excess of 3.5 degrees, which will be even more catastrophic than surpassing 1.5 would get us to. So those are the main demands that we're making. Of course, there are a range of other demands with regard to forests, with regard to other specific pieces, but I would say those are the headlines of what we are focused here in Paris on.
And if we take a realistic approach, what of those demands do you think we will be able to get?
I think firstly we'll get the 5-year review mechanism, even though some countries are blocking. I think we will get some element of bindingness. It might not be a full-fledged climate treaty like many of us want, which will, but we will continue to push for it. But I think right now, getting an agreement that does have teeth is a possibility, even though we might not have it as strong as we need it to be. The third thing that I think we will get is commitment to decarbonization of the planet and ensuring and a very big embracing of renewables. Again, the question is whether we will try to do this by 2050 or whether we will delay till 2100. So I think on all the areas we will see movement in the right direction, but the question is, will it be deep enough? Will it be big enough? Will it be ambitious enough?
And lastly, what's your message to the people out there, to the people who marched on the weekend, to the people who are watching the COP from outside?
To all the people who are following this closely from a distance, I think the important thing for us to say to our political leaders is that this is not simply about saving the planet. That in fact the struggle that we engaged in here is whether humanity can develop a way to coexist with nature in a mutually interdependent relationship for centuries and centuries and centuries to come. Put differently, this struggle is about securing our children and their children's future. And therefore, the main message I say to people, irrespective of what our leaders decide here by the end of this COP, the struggle continues the next day, irrespective of what they agree or do not agree. We cannot rely solely on our political and business leaders to do the right thing. And this struggle is one that has momentum. Your voices, those people who participated in those historic marches over the weekend, your voices are being heard, is having an impact. We need to get more and more people involved in this movement, and we have to ensure that we keep pressure on our leaders, not simply on an annual basis, and not simply on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis, because what we are fighting for here is fundamentally the survival of the human species, and therefore no energy can be spared to actually achieve that. I would say also that this moment of history calls for more than 1 billion acts of courage, and what is needed is also for us to be able to actually put our lives on the line if necessary, engage in civil disobedience if necessary, and be bold and courageous in how we get our governments to bury the fossil fuel era and embrace the renewable energy era. And our leaders must recognize that we are not stupid. We can see that they are beholden to fossil fuel companies, that they act more in the interests of the powerful and the big corporations, and we've had enough of that. And right now, governments must step forward and put the interests of ordinary people and the citizens as a whole, rather than simply acting as agents of the big, powerful multinationals, especially in the fossil fuel sector.
Perfect. Thanks very much for taking time to talk to us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.